2 small screws on the side and 1 on the top, and this thing is out. We just take it right out gently. You'll notice one large Molex cable that connects the CD player to the main board. There are several wires here that we can work with. You want to find out which of these wires is associated with the audio signal. The board on the actual CD player is labeled left channel, audio ground, right channel. If you follow those traces back to the connector, you can clearly see which wires those signals are associated with. Gently work the cable out of the CD player so that we can free up the wires. Once again, the far right 3 wires are the ones we want to work on. From left to right they are left audio, audio ground, right audio. We need to get these wires out of this connector, and we can do that using a small jeweler tip flathead screwdriver. Lift up the 3 plastic fingers that are holding these wires into the connector. This is what those little plastic fingers look like when you lift them up. At this point, these 3 wires can now be pulled right out of this connector. When the wires are freed up, keep track of them so you know which one's which. You might even want to label them if you need to. Looking at these 3 wires again, we have left audio, audio ground, and right audio. Let's focus on our cable. Here's the cable we're going to use. We got to first sacrifice one end of it by just clipping it off. Now we use our wire strippers to reveal the 3 contacts in this wire. Use a larger hole to get the black shielding off, and then use smaller holes to get the red and the black wire revealed. Twist the ends of them so that they look good. Remember that the common ground is on the right. This wire is supposed to be exposed. Now we need to prep the 3 wires inside the stereo itself. Go ahead and cut them about 2/3 of the way up from the main board and set the little tails that you just cut off to the side. You will need these later. We have to strip all these wires so that they are ready to be connected. I couldn't use my wire strippers because the smallest hole on my wire strippers was not small enough for these wires, so I had to cut it by hand. I used my side cutters to gently nip around the edge of the rubber and then pull off the rubber by hand. It was very delicate work, so please use caution. If you cut too much of these wires off, you might be in trouble. With all the tips of all these wires stripped and ready to go, I need to get my cubby hole ready. As I had said before, I planned to run the auxiliary cable through the back of this cubby hole. First, I need to take my drill to drill a hole into the back corner of this plastic cubby hole. Now you see that I've done that. I have ran the cable through that hole, and the other end of the cable that is having the exposed wires, I've run through the side of the stereo through a hole that was already there so that it can meet up with these guys. Ready for splicing. First, twist the black wire from the aux cable into the first white wire. This is the left channel. Take all 3, the black wire, the white wire coming up from the main board, and the small tail that you cut off earlier, and just twist them together by hand. Do the same thing for the ground, which is the middle wire, and the right channel, which is the last wire. When they've all been twisted together, use your soldering iron to tin the connections and make them sturdy. Just heat up the connection itself until it gets sufficiently hot, and then put the tip of some solder on there and let it flow onto the wires. Then bend the tips of the wires up so that they are pointing upward, ready to go into the CD player connector. Now use the multimeter to make sure you have a good continuity between the aux jack and all 3 of the terminals. Make sure that the tip of the aux jack is associated with the left channel. Make sure the ring of the aux jack is associated with the right channel, and make sure that the sleeve is associated with the ground channel. As long as you have a beep when you connect each of these 3 respective connections, you have a good solid connection on them. Now cut the heat shrink into 3 pieces and slide each piece over each wire. Apply heat to each of the pieces of heat shrink using your soldering iron until it shrinks over the connection so that there are no exposed wires. The first part of your ground wire will be exposed. This is normal because the ground wire is not shielded by default. Now we need to slide our 3 terminals back into our CD player connector. Remember how earlier we lifted up those little plastic fingers? Well, now we're going to backtrack. We're going to slide the terminals back into this connector, And then we'll use needle nose pliers to mash those three plastic little fingers back down. You can see here the end result. Give each wire a gentle tug to make sure that those three wires are in there securely. Whoops, one of them fell out. That means I got to go back and redo that wire and mash it back down to make sure it's secure. You might need to use a jeweler flathead screwdriver to get down in there really good and wedge that little finger in there to make sure those wires are in solidly. This is the end result. Kind of looks like a mess from a distance, but it's a very good, well-connected system here. All three connections are shielded with heat shrink, and at this point we're going to backtrack and put everything back into place. Go ahead and gently reconnect the CD player connector back into the CD player itself. After you've done that, take your multimeter and do one more test, this time testing from the tip of the aux jack onto the actual CD player board where the nodes are labeled left channel, audio ground, and right channel. That way you know for a fact that you have a good clean connection between your aux jack and the actual CD player circuit board. Once again, this system requires that you burn a blank CD full of blank audio tracks. Play that blank CD in your CD player. This will allow you to listen to whatever is hooked into your aux jack in your car. We've reassembled everything, and we have almost remounted the stereo back in. Just before I put it all back in, I want to test it and make sure this is the moment of truth. I've burned a CD full of just blank audio, no audio. It's playing right now. Got the iPod Touch here, and let's see what happens. It seems to work. Cool. It works. And now we're going to put it all back together. Thanks for watching, and good luck.